Greetings, and welcome to the Haunted Tea, your source for ghostly folklore and other spooky urban legends. Today, we're going to be taking a look into a state park in Lawrence County, Pennsylvania. McConnell's Mill State Park is reportedly home to many wayward spirits, and the nearby trail of Hell's Hollow is rumored to be home to a dark and ominous entity. Appropriately named the Dark Thing by locals who've encountered the being. The main attraction of the park is the historic grist mill and covered bridge, which are the focal points of many ghostly tales. The McConnell's Mill covered bridge crosses over the Slippery Rock Creek, which is inappropriately called a creek. In fact, it is a very dangerous and tumultuous river. Many swimmers, fishermen, kayakers, and even rescue divers sent in to save them have submerged in these treacherous waters to find themselves trapped among the jagged rocks. These poor individuals are then crushed by the powerful current of the waters, and many of them, sadly, have drowned. Perhaps it is these numerous lives lost, claimed by the Slippery Rock, that has attracted the attention of something sinister to the area. The woods surrounding another section of the state park, named Hell's Hollow, are said to be home to a terrifying entity only known as the Dark Thing. Before we elaborate on the paranormal happenings, let's take a quick dive into the history of McConnell's Mill. The grist mill was built on the banks of the Slippery Rock Creek in 1852 and was constructed again in 1868 because the original building was destroyed in a fire. Tom McConnell, a Civil War veteran, purchased the mill in 1875 and modernized it with new equipment for the time. The mill continued to produce grain needed to feed the community for about 50 years until its official closing in 1928. Commonwealth of Pennsylvania then claimed ownership of the mill and the surrounding property in 1946, and McConnell's Mill State Park was formally opened in 1957. The covered bridge is almost as old as the mill itself, having been built in 1874. Both the grist mill and the covered bridge have a modern-day reputation of being extremely haunted. Both the bridges in the park, as well as the old-time factories, were prone to tragic accidents. Visitors to the park have reported sightings of apparitions of workers killed on the job. According to legend, on some nights, a ghostly mill worker can be seen approaching the mill and entering the building. In some accounts, it is even said that he turns on the lights inside and begins to cry out in pain, as if reliving the accident in some kind of spectral loop. It has proven rather difficult to trace the origins of this story. Upon searching for records of accidental deaths in the area, we were unable to find any for 19th century mill workers. However, it was not hard to find page after page of grisly recordings of drownings and suicides that have occurred in the park over the years. The covered bridge is the focal point of even more ghostly lore. As legend goes, visitors to the bridge at night will encounter one of two spirits. The first specter known to haunt the bridge is the ghost of the former caretaker of the mill, Moses Wharton. Moses Wharton was born in 1860 and came to work for Tom McConnell at the age of 20. He was an African American who was born into slavery in the state of North Carolina. He and his mother obtained their freedom and traveled to Newcastle, Pennsylvania in hopes of making a better life for themselves. In 1880, he met Tom McConnell and was given the job of caretaker of the grist mill. Records indicate that he was a well-liked and respected member of the community. He was extremely hardworking and seemingly dedicated his life to the mill. He remained caretaker of the building even after its closing in 1928, all the way up until 1952, just 2 years before his death. Despite having been born into slavery, it appears that Wharton led a peaceful and quiet life in rural western Pennsylvania. Because he dedicated most of his life to looking after McConnell's Mill, we believe that it would make sense for his spirit to linger in the area, continuing to keep a watch over the mill. Rumor has it, if you park your car on the old covered bridge at night and honk your horn, you may just summon the spirit of Moses Wharton. Based on our research, we believe that if Wharton did in fact continue to watch over McConnell's Mill, his spirit would likely be friendly in nature, given the fact that he lived a long and seemingly happy life. However, there is a legend of another spirit lingering within the bridge that has a very, very different story to tell. Our second resident spirit is said to be that of a little girl who was supposedly killed in a car crash that happened near the covered bridge. The locals have a summoning ritual for the child's spirit that is similar to that of Moses Wharton's. Legend has it that if you park your car on the covered bridge at night and turn the headlights off, you can conjure the spirit by honking your car horn 3 times. After the final honk, look into your rearview mirror and you will see the phantom child in the back seat of your car before she vanishes On the other end of the park, about 7 miles away, is a hiking area known as Hell's Hollow. And although the name implies demonic activity, the trail is actually named for an old limestone kiln that sits at the end of the trail, across from a waterfall. The kiln was built in the 1850s, and folks who stumbled across it in the woods at night believed that it looked like a doorway to hell because of the smoldering stones, ominous glow, and sulfurous odor. Even though Hell's Hollow is miles away from the covered bridge and the treacherous Slippery Rock Creek, some visitors have claimed to experience paranormal phenomenon, especially at night. These encounters vary in nature, from flying lights and distant glowing eyes, to people actually being chased out of the woods by something they could hear, but couldn't see. Interviews with eyewitnesses provided the Haunted Tea with an exclusive look into the nature of the dark thing of Hell's Hollow. No one is exactly sure what the dark thing is, but witnesses claim to have been washed over by a feeling of absolute darkness and dread in its mere presence. On one autumn night, in October of 2014, a group of friends were walking the trail back towards the waterfall when they heard something large crashing through the trees above over their heads. The frightened friends huddled together and attempted to shine what little light their cell phones could provide on whatever was causing the disruption. They could see nothing, and then they realized they also heard nothing. Immediately following the crashing sound, they noticed that the woods had gone completely silent. Any previously heard running water or chirping insects had mysteriously vanished. A group of friends decided to turn back to the parking lot into the safety of their cars when the entity in the trees pursued the panicked group, and as they fled in terror, they heard what can only be described as an awful chittering noise following them through the darkness in the trees above. Later that same year, on a clear winter's night, another visitor to the park spotted something very peculiar lurking along the trail. Witness and his friend were standing on the last bridge along the trail, smoking cigarettes and shooting the breeze, when he spotted a bizarre-looking creature crawling across the trail in front of him. The thing was humanoid in appearance, but it was gaunt and shriveled, with grayish skin, and it was also completely naked. The two men watched in horror as it disappeared into the underbrush. Asked to elaborate on its appearance as best as possible, both witnesses agreed that it bore an uncanny resemblance to a creature very well known on the internet, a creature called the Rake. For those who may be unfamiliar with the Rake, it is described as a grotesque humanoid cryptid. Its appearance is often likened to the creature Gollum from Lord of the Rings. Both creatures possess gray skin and bulbous eyes, presumably for seeing in the dark. But what exactly is the Rake, and could it be what's stalking the woods of Hell's Hollow after dark? Historically, humanity has always had an innate interest with the supernatural. Stories about beings such as witches, ghosts, and demons are practically as old as humanity itself. The Rake, however, did not make its appearance into mainstream urban legend until the early 2000s, and it emerged through the internet. Journalist Jacob Greers investigated the Rake's origins for his article based on a true story. He claims that the Rake is pure fiction and has tracked its origins to sites like Reddit, 4chan, and creepypastas. He goes on to deduce that the Rake story came into being almost exactly like the Slender Man story, and that pictures and sightings are fake to give folks browsing the web a good scare. However, could the Rake start as just a scary story, but somehow be able to manifest itself through the power of the collective human mind as its popularity grew? This sounds like a pretty crazy stretch, but is it altogether impossible? Maybe, or maybe not. Let's take a quick look into the Philip experiment. In 1972, Dr. A.R. George Owen and his team conducted the famous experiment in Toronto. Their goal was to establish contact with a completely fictional spirit via a classic seance. The team created Philip Aylesford, ghost of a wealthy 17th century Englishman. They wrote him an entire backstory complete with a tragic romance and death by suicide. As the team held their seance with Philip, contact was actually successful. The entity responded with disembodied knocking, and most of its answers were consistent to that of Philip's imaginary story. And at one point, Philip even managed to move the table that the team was seated at. While most skeptics interpreted the results of the Philip experiment as proof that supernatural phenomenon exists purely within our minds, other interpretations of the experiment is that the human mind itself is capable of conjuring amazing phenomena. But what about the multiple sightings of creatures such as the Rake? Given this latter theory, Could the collective human psyche have actually summoned the rake from the scary stories into reality? Or could this thing be something else entirely? Similar accounts and sightings of skinny, pale, and often naked creatures have been reported all around the world. People who have witnessed these creatures firsthand often classify them as cryptids that are simply known as crawlers. Unfortunately, and even though we have researched the topic much, we haven't been able to find any solid leads regarding on what the creature, the dark thing, of Hell's Hollow could actually be. The eyewitness accounts of strange encounters and testimony of those leave us with more questions than answers. Could it be a spirit, or even possibly a demonic entity that has been drawn to the frequent deaths that have occurred in the area? Or could it be a cryptid, such as the rake or the crawler? If you ever find yourself visiting Lawrence County, Pennsylvania, do consider stopping by McConnell's Mill State Park. Though we may have painted the picture that the park is nothing but a place full of tragedy and horrifying encounters, it is a very beautiful place, full of great hiking trails and beautiful scenic vistas. Just try to be out of there by dark. Not only is it park rules, but who knows, maybe you yourself will have your own encounter with one of the numerous spirits that are said to haunt the area, or even worse, the dark thing. Stay safe out there, friends, and thank you for listening.